Hey, so I don't normally do things like this, but I thought it might be interesting to go over sort of my process of when I'm working in Clip Studio Paint and how I end up with the final product. Now, of course, this is going to be sort of a general overview, so I can't go into too much detail about every single little thing, so if anybody has any more questions, I'm totally happy to answer them in the comments or even make another video on those specific niches or areas. Anyways, let's get into it. So, when I usually start with a piece, I have a general idea of what I want to go for in terms of like the final product. Nothing that's super concrete, but you know, something to give me a good basis. And then I'll go straight into it, get that basis down and fix it and work around it. As you can see, I do a lot of refining in the sketch period. Not all the time, but depending on what it is, like if it's really detailed, I'll try to make sure I have all the details there, all the major like lines and forms in there. And I'll keep refining that and doing new layers and merging them and all that stuff. Generally, the more detailed it is, I want to avoid having to make up information on the spot while I'm doing the line work, so I want to get it all down in the actual sketch itself so I can just knock out the lines super quick and easy. I like to refer to myself as a lazy artist, and so I do a lot of things that'll make my job easier in the end. And then here we go on to the lines. One thing you probably noticed that I do a lot when I do my lines is I try to avoid zooming in too deep. You'll probably hear this advice from a lot of like artists who are doing line works. It's just that I want the lines to be pretty consistent, and if you zoom in too much, it's a very easy way to it's a way to make the lines look too varied and to the point that they don't look like they fit together. And then in a similar sense, in the same way if I was drawing something physically where you can see everything as you're doing it, I want to make sure I can see as much as possible while I'm drawing. A lot of my earlier years drawing line art, I would zoom in too close and I just get, I'd get real into it. And then when I zoomed out, I'd look at it and go, ew, I hate this. And then another thing that's kind of specific to me, I like to color the lines themselves. And so I'll do a lot of things with the intention to color the lines later. And so in some of the areas on this piece, you'll notice like heavy blacks in specific areas, whether it's like under the chin, places where shadows are, or even like the eyes. And that's just because later I'm just going to color it in with a big flat color. And so that's what that's for. And so another thing that I do when I start adding colors is I try to make sure all my lines are closed, so that way I can just select the whole thing and then fill it all in with like a single color. And then I'll follow that up with colors on top of that layer in a clipping layer, just so everything stays within that region basically. It's another trick I pulled up that helps me speed up my process, so I'm not like constantly erasing lines and having to clean them up. And then the reason I try to do all the colors on a separate layer is so in that way, if I'm not liking the vibes of a certain color combination, I can always swap them out super quickly. And then of course my favorite part is to color my lines. I really like the way it makes everything pop, and it sort of separates the various like layers and different like pieces of a character or the subject in a very interesting way. And I do a very similar thing with the colors as well, add a little gradient here and there just to make it more visually distinct and interesting. And then one thing you notice is that Kimberly is lacking a couple more of her braids, and that's because I intended on making them background pieces. So I do this by just making a flat color behind everything with kind of a vague shape in there so you can see them. Something super easy and quick, and this way I don't have to like do any special kind of like extra line work or color those lines as well. And my shading is mostly just simple cell shading, nothing too special about that. And then finally, I'm a big fan of texture in art, and like there's no rules kind of approach to doing things. And so I do a lot of testing with like screen tones and different like textures just to like make the art stand out in some way. And in this case, you're going to see me doing a lot of experimentation here, where at this point I've already done what I came out to do, so I'm just trying to spice it up in some way. One thing that I really liked about this one is grabbing the Red Bull can. I wasn't sure what I wanted to do with the Red Bull can initially, and I ended up not using the Red Bull can for anything but its shape and then adding my own text to it. And then I followed that up with a special like a spray can kind of a tool that I can use to chip away at things to give them this very neat like graffiti stencil feel to them, just so it just feels more gritty and interesting. And then last but not least, I have a lot of like extra texts and like pseudo branding things I've made that I added to the piece because I kind of like the look of like magazines with too much on them, or like discount DVDs with like stickers all over them. And so I try to add that look to a lot of my work nowadays when I'm like making big stuff like this, just because I think it looks cool. voila, here we have the final product. And if you liked what you saw, feel free to give me a like, comment, and subscribe and all that. I hope you enjoyed and learned a thing or two, and peace out.